If you've been watching me for a while, you'll know the Fujifilm X100V is/was my favorite camera. It's the camera I think really pulled me into photography, and I have a lot of fond memories and photos bringing it around to different places. But since upgrading to the X100VI, I stopped using the V. This was in part because they're very similar and you don't need to carry two of the same camera. But after using the 6 for some time, I began to question if the upgrade was truly necessary. I didn't really need the 40 megapixels, and the upgrades I was excited about, like IBIS, didn't fully live up to my expectations. So I began to think, if that's the case, then maybe sticking to the V or downgrading later might be the option. But I still had to test it out first. So last year, in my 2-week trip to Cambodia, I dusted off my old favorite camera, the X100V, and took it for another ride. This was my experience. My trip with the V. I don't know what I was expecting, but traveling with the V was a familiar experience. Give or take a few differences that we'll talk about later, the V isn't that different from the 6, and using the camera felt like returning home. During my 2 weeks in Cambodia, I made it a point to stick to this camera only. Of course, I brought the X-T4 and the 18-55 as a backup for days where we explored the temples, but for the most part, I used the V. My main purpose, after all, was to travel light and experience the country in a candid way. Unsurprisingly, the V was perfect for this. Although it's a nice camera, at a side glance, it doesn't look super impressive. Larger DSLRs or anything with interchangeable lenses would surely take the cake. Of course, you're still going to stand out because of your clothes and having a camera in the first place, but my dad even told me that people would rather mug me for my smartphone than this guy. Plus, with all the places we went to, something smaller and lower profile was preferred. Photos in street markets, restaurants, and tuk-tuks were easy to be subtle and candid with. For example, these photos I took of a street market in Battambang. The pathways were tight, enclosed, and compact, and anything other than a small camera with a slightly wider lens would have been hard to capture the right shots. Local specialties, fish, produce, as well as people became the subjects for the essence I tried to capture. Looking back on some of these images, there seems to be a bit of a bloom or haze. I'm not entirely sure if this was because of the V itself or because of the humidity of the country, because I wasn't using a diffusion filter. For example, in this photo I took of Pub Street in Siem Reap, you can tell there's a lot of halation going on. It wasn't something I accounted for going in, but honestly not a big problem either. Throughout the weeks, I gained a lot of confidence in traveling with just one camera. It's often when you carry more than one body or lens, you begin to worry about needing more. Having a zoom to cover your bases, having another body for other things. But sticking to just one camera, one lens in the V wasn't as restrictive as I thought it'd be. Sure, there were plenty of shots I couldn't get because of the focal length, but it didn't bother me so much. Rather, there's less to worry about, less to think about, and the focus is singular on this specific type of photography. Minute differences. Although more or less similar cameras, there were a small differences I noticed between the 6 and the V. They are minute and probably irrelevant for most people, but here's what I picked up on. The 6 in general is a nicer and smoother shooting experience. Things like timing, startup speed, etc. are all slightly faster on the 6, and these slight improvements make for a better feel. I should note that things like startup speed never actually bothered me on the V. The V is plenty fast and quicker to turn on and snap than most cameras I've used. I had simply been calibrated to the processor of the 6 in my time using it and had noticed the difference. Another thing, weight. Each time I pick up the V, I'm reminded of the weight difference. The V is a slightly lighter camera. This is because it lacks the IBIS mechanism in the 6, which over time I realized isn't essential for my photography. Compared to one another, the V feels like the perfect weight, not too light and not too heavy. It probably doesn't matter to most people, but it's a feeling thing. The camera feels great in my hands, easy to angle and move around, and something just clicks for me every single time I pick up the camera. Now, in terms of strictly image quality, I was actually surprised. I once mentioned how 26 megapixels was the sweet spot and all I really needed. The look itself is nicely modern without being too clinical, but after shooting and editing photos on the 40 megapixel 6, I could tell the images are much cleaner. I don't know if that's because of the environment, the editing program I'm using, or the cameras themselves, but they're crisp. I used to think this look was too digital and I preferred the images of the V. But over time, I've begun to appreciate the 6's look as well. In my opinion, there's a positive side to both, and whichever you like probably comes down to personal preference. In addition to this, there's a bit more separation on images with the 6. I don't know if this is because of the sensor, megapixel, or resolution, since they shouldn't affect depth of field in that way, but many of my images with the 6 appear to have slightly more separation. This can be a good thing if I want more of it, but it can make focus a bit trickier. The reason I like shooting with a V was because I could point and shoot and still have reliable subjects in focus even at f2. But with the 6, missing focus can be a bit more obvious. Of course, I could always raise my aperture, making it less of a problem, but I like f2 for a reason. In essence, going back to the V for a couple of weeks actually surprised me. I thought I would be reminded of all the great things of the V, realize I didn't need the 6, and be tempted to sell it. But spending solo time with each camera actually made me come to appreciate the 6's upgrades and capabilities. My return to V fantasy. I have a confession to make. After upgrading to the 6, and even now, I have this small fantasy in my head of one day selling all my gear, buying a fresh V, and going one camera, one lens for the rest of the time. Maybe this is nostalgia speaking. I have a lot of fond memories with the camera that got me into photography. Maybe it just sounds cool, because for all intents and purposes, it's less practical. I also think it'd be much simpler and I could spend time mastering one type of photography which could make living and taking photos more seamless. But all things considered, it's not quite time for that yet. At first, the 6 felt a bit overkill. It's an upgrade and for many reasons is the better camera, but it was more than I needed. And I'm the type of guy who likes the idea of shaving off the excess, rolling back to the essentials, cutting all the fluff. If I don't need it, I won't use it, making extra things and features a waste of money. So IBIS, heavier camera, more megapixels, more expensive, were all things I could live without. And the only real things I would miss now are Nostalgic Negative and Reala Ace. These film simulations have really grown on me in the past year or so, but they aren't on the V. But even though the 6 is overkill, the upgrade was ultimately necessary. This trip especially reminded me of all the wear and tear I put the V through. My V is pretty beaten up. Marks, scratches, sticky dials and focus rings, and crooked battery doors. Plus, it got what might be the final nail in the coffin. The wooden bird soft shutter release I had for years actually split in half. So maybe that's a sign. A sign to let go of the past and focus on the present. I'll still take this camera out here and there, obviously, but since I have the 6, I'll enjoy using it. And maybe one day, I'll make the full return. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be doing a full comparison between these two cameras in a future video, so stay tuned for that. If you want to learn more and build a solid foundation with photography, check out Photography Essentials. It's free. We also have new prints, limited merch, and photography zines available in the links down below. Thanks for watching as always. Happy shooting. Have a great day. Peace.